the sand awaits. Gladiators' final moments before the arena. Hey guys, welcome back to another night of calm chaos, ancient sweat, and questionable Roman hobbies. Go ahead and get comfy. Dim the lights, fluff your pillow, maybe take a sip of water or wine, depending on your mood. Because tonight, we're drifting back about 2,000 years to a place where people literally paid to watch other people die. Yes, ancient Rome, the empire that gave us aqueducts, architecture, and blood sport as primetime entertainment. And tonight's focus isn't on the roar of the crowd or the clash of steel. Not yet. We're going to hover in that strange, tense quiet before the fight. That suspended breath, the sand not yet stained, the gladiators waiting in the tunnels. Those last few moments before stepping into an arena that might as well have been a one-way door. Because the Romans, for all their love of discipline and marble, were also just deeply weird about death. And nowhere was that weirdness clearer than in their relationship with the gladiators. Men who were both celebrities and slaves, idols and instruments, worshipped by the same people who cheered for their execution. So, let's float down through the stone corridors of the Colosseum, through the torchlight and the smell of oil, iron, and old fear. The calm before the roar. Imagine this. It's early morning. The sun's just peeking over the walls of the Colosseum, that giant ring of white travertine that could fit more than 50,000 people. Outside, vendors are already yelling. Bread, wine, roasted nuts. Inside, though, it's quieter. In the dim tunnels below, the gladiators wait. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals, the metallic clink of armor being adjusted, and the muttered prayers to Mars, to Fortuna, to anyone listening. Some are pacing, some are silent. A few might even be joking, because what else can you do when you're about to fight for your life in front of half of Rome? There's sweat. Always sweat. Even the air feels thick with it. And the smell, that's the part most history books skip. The scent of leather, blood that never quite washed away, oil from the skin of men who've been training, eating, and existing in cramped quarters. And somewhere nearby, an editor, that's the show's sponsor, is talking logistics, making sure the lions are hungry enough, the crowd seating is right, and that the emperor's special box is nicely shaded, because even mass death needed a bit of stage management. Let's pause there. This wasn't just chaos. Rome treated its games like a form of statecraft, a way to distract, impress, and unite the masses. You might say bread and circuses, and you'd be right. But imagine being one of those circuses' main attractions. The night before. The night before a fight, most gladiators didn't sleep much. Some drank a little too much wine, not because they were allowed to, but because guards could be bribed. Others prayed to Nemesis or Fortune, whispering into the dark. Some lay awake thinking of family, long gone. Some tried not to think at all. They'd been trained, of course, often for years. Most were slaves or prisoners of war. A few, surprisingly, were volunteers, free men drawn by the promise of money, fame, or the kind of admiration you couldn't buy anywhere else. Still, even for them, death was not some abstract thought. It was the next morning's appointment. Their last meal, called Coena Libera, was often a feast. Yes, really. Before the games, the gladiators were given a final dinner, open to the public. Crowds came to gawk at them like Roman reality TV. "There's the Thracian, he's fighting tomorrow." People whispered, placed bets, and stared. Some pitied them, others just wanted to guess who'd die fastest. It wasn't exactly comforting, but it was part of the ritual, a public acknowledgement of what was about to happen. And the men ate, maybe for the last time, while the crowd murmured and speculated around them. Because in Rome, everything was a performance, even your death. The ludus, the training ground of death. Most gladiators lived in training schools called ludi, and the most famous one sat right next to the Colosseum, the Ludus Magnus. Picture a grim dormitory with the strictest gym imaginable. Fenced courtyards, sand-filled pits for sparring, instructors yelling commands, and wooden weapons for practice. Food was simple: barley, beans, and ash. Yes, ash. They mixed it into their meals for extra minerals, like the world's worst protein shake. They were nicknamed barleymen because of this diet. Supposedly, it helped them build mass. Though, let's be honest, it probably also helped them bloat just enough to cushion a few sword hits. Every morning, they trained under watchful eyes. Discipline was absolute. Disobedience? Beatings. Cowardice? Worse. But here's the thing. Gladiators weren't trained to die quickly. They were trained to perform. The goal wasn't to kill your opponent fast. It was to make it beautiful. A dance of violence that looked good from the emperor's box. Because the audience didn't just want death. They wanted drama. And then the day came. The sound of the crowd above growing louder, the horns announcing the start, guards lining up, the editor's assistants hurrying back and forth, shouting names. Some gladiators rubbed oil on their arms, a ritual of strength and focus. Others kissed small charms hidden in their palms, tokens from wives, lovers, or fellow fighters who didn't make it. Then the doors opened, leading to the narrow passage under the arena floor. If you've ever been backstage before a show, imagine that, but everyone knows someone won't come back out. They walked barefoot or in sandals, depending on the armor type. They carried their helmets under one arm, heavy and shining under torchlight. And as they walked, some murmured the famous line, "Ave, Caesar, morituri te salutant." Hail, Caesar, those who are about to die salute you. Though, fun fact, that phrase was only recorded once in Roman history, at a mock naval battle under Emperor Claudius. Still, it's catchy enough that Hollywood made it standard. At the end of the tunnel, sunlight. Blinding after the torchlit bark. The sound of 50,000 voices hitting you all at once. The smell of dust and blood and flowers. Yes, flowers. Because the arena floor was often sprinkled with petals and perfume to keep the stench down. That first step into the light must have been surreal. The sand underfoot, the echoing cheers, the emperor's hand lifted in lazy greeting, and suddenly you're no longer a man. You're a symbol, a living spectacle. The emperor's role, the divine referee. The emperor didn't always attend, but when he did, the entire event revolved around him. He sat in the pulvinar, a cushioned imperial box shaded by purple cloth. People kept glancing at him between blows, because ultimately it was his thumb that mattered. Ah yes, the famous thumbs up or thumbs down. You've seen it in every movie, except no one actually knows which direction meant what. Roman writers describe gestures like turning the thumb or pressing the thumb, but never confirmed which meant mercy or death. So, for all we know,
Thumbs up might have meant kill him, which makes modern pep gestures a bit darker, doesn't it? When a gladiator fell, he'd drop his weapon and raise a finger, asking for mercy. The crowd would scream their opinion. Some chanted mite, spare him. Others yelled Eugula, slit his throat. But the final call came from the emperor or the sponsor. If he waved his hand or turned his thumb a certain way, that was it. Sometimes mercy, sometimes not, because mercy itself was entertainment.
Life in the Ludus after battle. Back at the Ludus, the training school, everything felt smaller after the arena. The walls seemed tighter, the air thicker. Some men celebrated, quietly with stolen wine and reckless laughter. Others just stared at the floor. Bandages wrapped around wounds that would never fully heal. Trainers walked by, inspecting injuries like farmers checking crops after a storm. And then, back to routine. Because there was no retirement plan, no therapy, no honor guard, only waiting for the next summons, the next crowd, the next sandstorm of death and applause. Gladiators weren't soldiers. They weren't patriots. They were entertainment. Disposable heroes in iron costumes. Picture the tunnels again. The sand still clinging to skin, the metallic taste of adrenaline fading from the mouth. A man who just killed another human being wipes his sword clean with a rag someone hands him, or maybe his own sleeve. Then he walks, limping, silent. There's no applause now, just the faint sound of footsteps, armor scraping and someone coughing in the distance. That's the sound of survival in Rome. Some men collapsed right there. Others helped carry the injured, not because they were friends, but because tomorrow's training partner might as well be today's rival. The lanista, their trainer and owner, waited at the end of the hall, counting, always counting, how many lived, how many died, how much money he made that day. To him, these weren't men. They were investments, walking assets with muscle and fear and scars. A good fighter meant more fame for the school, more contracts for future games. A dead one meant the loss of a product. Brutal, yes, but Rome was nothing if not practical about cruelty.
The price of glory. Life after the sand. Hey guys, welcome back, or welcome deeper, depending on how far you've drifted off already. If you're still awake, congratulations. You've survived another round of ancient Rome's favorite death match. If not, that's fine too. The Romans would have called that a merciful exit. So far, we've followed our gladiators through the tunnels, into the sunlight, and onto the sands. Now let's wander into what came after, because the arena didn't end when the crowd left, not for the men who fought in it. What happened once the cheering stopped? When the gods and emperors and sponsors turned their eyes elsewhere? Let's settle in, slow down, and float through the quiet aftermath, the strange, weary world of those who lived to tell the tale. The arena sleeps again. By evening, the games wound down. The shadows stretched long across the sand. The crowd began to file out, chatting about who fought best, whose technique was sloppy, who died bravely. The emperor left first, surrounded by guards. Vendors swept up their stalls, and down below, in the tunnels, the survivors limped back to the ludus, their bodies aching, their minds somewhere between relief and guilt. Some had killed friends, others had simply survived another day. The torches burned low, the sand above cooled, and by nightfall the Colosseum was silent again, a sleeping beast waiting for its next meal.
50,000 people, all believing for a few hours that they held life and death in their hands, that their cheers could spare a man, or their silence could doom him. There's a strange psychology there. Maybe it made ordinary Romans feel powerful in an empire where most of them had none. Maybe it was catharsis, a collective exhale of everything repressed in their own lives. Or maybe they just liked watching people bleed. Rome was complicated like that. Freedom, rare and precious. A gladiator could win his freedom, but it was rare. If you'd survived enough battles and impressed enough sponsors, you might be given a rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing release. That wooden sword meant everything. It said you'd earned your dignity back, that you could live as a free man again, your scars your only chains. Some took the chance and vanished into quiet lives. Others stayed, returning to the arena as trainers or celebrities. Because once you've tasted the roar of a crowd that chanted your name, ordinary life feels small. Freedom didn't always mean peace.
Between the fights, the sand was raked smooth again. Slaves came in to drag the bodies away, cover blood with fresh sand, and sometimes scatter flower petals, an ancient attempt at air freshening. You could almost pretend it was a reset button. The victor was paraded around. He might receive a crown of palm leaves, a pouch of coins, and wild applause. Sometimes even the emperor himself stood to acknowledge him. And then the next fight. There were usually dozens of matches in a day, from light skirmishes to staged hunts with wild animals. By midday, the air shimmered with heat, and the crowd grew restless. Vendors passed through selling honeyed wine and figs. Children climbed onto laps to see better. For Rome, this was family entertainment, just another Saturday. The crowd's power. The real spectacle, though, wasn't just the combatants. It was the crowd itself.
Death as performance. When death did come, it wasn't quick. A defeated gladiator was expected to die well. That meant kneeling gracefully, exposing the neck, and waiting calmly for the final blow. The victor would step forward, sword angled just right, between the collarbone and shoulder where it would pierce the heart cleanly. That was considered the proper death. Neat, dignified, efficient. If you flinched or screamed, the crowd booed. If you faced it like a stoic Roman statue come to life, you were immortalized. It sounds horrific, and it was, but within their strange logic, it was also honor. The Romans worshipped control, even in death. To die without fear meant you'd mastered the only thing left to master, yourself. So yes, the arena wasn't just about violence. It was about virtue theater. Courage on display. Pain repackaged as morality. The Romans applauded that, loudly.
Fame, Rome's sweetest poison.
But here's the strange thing.
Some gladiators became famous, like actual celebrities. Their faces on pottery, their names whispered in markets, their images scratched onto tavern walls. Rome adored its killers. If you were good enough, your name might spread from city to city. Women sent love notes, sometimes written in blood. Some even offered, let's say, personal favors through the bars of the gladiator barracks. There's a famous graffiti found in Pompeii that reads, "Celadus the Thracian makes the girls sigh." That's an actual line carved by someone who apparently had strong opinions about Celadus's charm. So yes, even in ancient times, there were fangirls and fan graffiti. But fame in Rome was fickle. One wrong step in the arena, one bad match, and the same crowd that cheered your victories would cheer your execution. Glory was just another form of debt, and Rome always collected. The wooden sword. Freedom, sort of. If you somehow survived enough matches, impressed enough people, and didn't lose any limbs in the process, you might be awarded the rudis, a small wooden sword. That sword wasn't meant for fighting. It symbolized freedom. It said, "You've paid your dues. You can leave now." Some men cried when they got it. Others laughed, maybe out of disbelief. Because leaving the arena wasn't just about freedom. It was about losing the only identity you'd had for years. Imagine spending half your life being cheered for bloodshed, and then suddenly no one's watching. You're free, yes, but free to what? To wander? To beg? To try being normal in a society that watched you kill people for fun? Many freed gladiators stayed close to the games. They became trainers, guards, even executioners. They couldn't escape what they'd been shaped into. Once Rome had you under its thumb, it rarely let go completely. Scars and silence. There's a strange quiet that follows those who've lived too close to death for too long. Roman writers hinted at it, but never said it outright, maybe because they didn't want to look too closely. Seneca, the philosopher, once wrote that attending the games made him feel less human. He described the crowd's bloodlust, the joy in killing, and the way the arena made cruelty look like courage. If that's what the audience felt, imagine the men in the sand. Many gladiators, even the freed ones, lived short lives. Infections, old wounds, exhaustion, they piled up. And for those who made it to old age, the past never really left. Scars mapped across their skin like a second language, one written in steel and pain. Some might have found small peace, a vineyard, a family, anonymity. Others haunted the training yards, passing on lessons to new recruits who died just as young as they almost did. Rome didn't make room for veterans. It made room for spectacle. But the empire that built the arena also began to crumble. As centuries passed, Rome's taste for slaughter slowly dulled, or at least became too expensive to maintain. By the 4th and 5th centuries, Christian emperors began to frown on the games. They said it was unholy, uncivilized, maybe even bad for PR. In 404 CE, the last recorded gladiatorial contest took place. Legend says it ended when a monk named Telemachus jumped into the arena and tried to stop the fight. The crowd, being the crowd, stoned him to death. But his death embarrassed the Emperor Honorius enough to finally ban the games. That was it. Centuries of blood, fame, and sand
gone like smoke in the wind. The Colosseum fell silent. Weeds grew through the cracks where once men had fought for their lives. And Rome, in all its faded grandeur, tried to pretend the games had never really been them. Echoes in the sand. Even now, when you stand inside the Colosseum, there's an eerie stillness. The air feels heavy, as if it remembers. Tourists shuffle through the same tunnels, their footsteps soft echoes of the men who once walked to death. Every stone, every arch, every patch of sand, it's all steeped in memory, not of emperors or generals, but of ordinary men who died to make strangers cheer. And maybe that's why the place still feels alive, because history never really leaves. It just lingers. The ghosts of the arena aren't angry, they're just tired. They've been performing for 2,000 years. Rome's favorite mirror. The truth is, Rome built its identity on contrast, civilization and savagery, beauty and brutality. The Colosseum was its perfect mirror, a monument to what humanity can achieve and what it's willing to destroy to stay entertained. And in that mirror, we still catch glimpses of ourselves. Every time we gather to watch people hurt each other for sport or fame or spectacle, even if it's just on a screen. Maybe that's the legacy of the gladiators, not their deaths, but what they showed us, that humans have always loved stories of courage and pain, that we still cheer for struggle, even when we know how it ends. Because deep down, we're all a little Roman, just with better plumbing. Let's end softly here. The arena is empty again. The torches have gone out. The sand lies still. And somewhere in the dark, maybe, a voice echoes faintly. A salute, a whisper, a promise of tomorrow's spectacle. Ave, morituri te salutant. Hail, those who are about to die salute you. But tonight, we let them rest. When Rome fell silent, the afterlife of the Colosseum. Hey there again. We're back. Or maybe we never left. The torches have burned low, the crowds have long gone home, and the Colosseum stands empty. The sand has cooled, the blood has faded, and Rome's favorite playground of death has gone quiet. So tonight, we're not watching the fights. We're wandering through the ruins. We're going to float through time, past the empire, past the emperors, into the long, strange afterlife of the arena that refused to die. Because if you think the Colosseum simply fell apart and that was the end of it, well, Rome never does anything simply. From roar to ruin. Let's start in the 5th century. The empire's cracking apart like old marble. Barbarian armies are knocking on the gates. Emperors are being replaced faster than you can say Senatus Populusque Romanus. And the Colosseum? It's still standing. Mostly. The last games had ended decades before. The emperors, now Christian, didn't exactly want to be associated with all that pagan slaughter. So the arena that once echoed with cheers now sat in eerie silence. But Rome was Rome. Nothing ever stayed empty for long. The Colosseum became a kind of multi-purpose building, a ruin that refused to behave like one. People lived in it. Yes, really. By the 6th century, there were workshops, houses, even stables inside the old corridors. The sand floor was gone, replaced with little shanties, fires, and laundry lines. It must have been a surreal place to live. Children playing where men once fought to the death, chickens scratching through sand that had soaked centuries of blood. Every step on that ground must have felt like walking over ghosts.
From roar to ruin. Let's start in the 5th century.
The empire's cracking apart like old marble. Barbarian armies are knocking on the gates. Emperors are being replaced faster than you can say Senatus Populusque Romanus. And the Colosseum? It's still standing. Mostly. The last games had ended decades before. The emperors, now Christian, didn't exactly want to be associated with all that pagan slaughter. So the arena that once echoed with cheers now sat in eerie silence. But Rome was Rome. Nothing ever stayed empty for long. The Colosseum became a kind of multi-purpose building, a ruin that refused to behave like one. People lived in it. Yes, really. By the 6th century, there were workshops, houses, even stables inside the old corridors. The sand floor was gone, replaced with little shanties, fires, and laundry lines. It must have been a surreal place to live. Children playing where men once fought to the death, chickens scratching through sand that had soaked centuries of blood. Every step on that ground must have felt like walking over ghosts.
The age of looting, when Rome ate itself. Then came the looters. See, the Colosseum wasn't just an old ruin, it was a gold mine. The Romans had built it with marble, bronze, and iron clamps so strong they held the stones like bone and sinew. And in medieval times, that meant free building materials. By the 11th century, the Colosseum was being mined, not for treasure, but for its bones. Chunks of marble were hauled off to build palaces and cathedrals. Iron clamps were pried out, leaving holes like scars across the stone. And yet, the Colosseum refused to vanish. Even half ruined, it loomed over the city, a reminder of Rome's glory and its guilt. It was both a wound and a monument.
A fortress for families, the arena turns noble. At some point in the Middle Ages, the Frangipani family decided, you know what this old ruin needs? Curtains and guards. So they moved in. They fortified it, built towers and walls, turned the Colosseum into a literal castle. Because apparently when you've got a former death arena just sitting there, the only logical thing to do is redecorate and call it home. For almost a century, it served as a private fortress, part crumbling amphitheater, part medieval stronghold. Imagine knights patrolling the same corridors where gladiators once sharpened swords. History recycling itself in stone. But nothing in Rome ever stays one thing for long. The church moved in and the blood became sacred. By the 14th century, the Colosseum had lost its noble tenets, and that's when the church began to look at it differently. It wasn't just an old ruin anymore. It was a symbol, a relic of the persecuted Christians who were said to have died there. Now, historically, there's no solid proof that Christians were executed in the Colosseum itself. Most likely they were killed elsewhere, in smaller amphitheaters, or under emperors who preferred efficiency over grandeur. But that didn't stop the story. By the Renaissance, the Colosseum was seen as a sacred site. Popes declared it holy ground. Crosses were erected in the center of the arena. Pilgrims came to pray where they believed martyrs had bled. The place, once known for blood and entertainment, became a shrine for redemption.
Rome, always good at rewriting its own stories, had turned a killing floor into a church floor, because nothing says salvation quite like historical rebranding. The Colosseum of artists and romantics. By the centuries drifted on, the Colosseum started to attract a new crowd: poets, painters, dreamers. By the 18th and 19th centuries, it was the darling of the Romantic era. People came not for spectacle, but for melancholy. Lord Byron wrote about it. Painters sketched its broken arches under the moonlight. Travelers whispered about the ghosts that haunted its corridors. Gladiators, martyrs, wild beasts, emperors watching from the shadows. For them, it wasn't just a ruin. It was a metaphor, a symbol of the fall of empire, the vanity of power, and the poetry of decay.
Rome, by then, was covered in ruins, but the Colosseum stood out because it wasn't just architecture. It was emotion carved in stone, a reminder that everything grand eventually breaks, and that sometimes broken things are the most beautiful. Nature takes the stage. During all that time, something else quietly reclaimed the Colosseum: nature. With the crowds gone and the stones cracked, plants began to grow. By the 17th century, over 400 different species of wild plants had taken root in its walls. Wildflowers, herbs, moss, even small trees. Botanists came from across Europe just to study it. It was like nature's revenge, greenery thriving where Rome once celebrated death. You can almost imagine it: vines curling around ancient arches, flowers blooming where blood once fell. The Colosseum became a kind of accidental garden, proof that even ruins can breathe again. Then came the 19th and 20th centuries, the age of archaeology, photography, and tourism. The Italian state began restoring what was left. They propped up collapsing arches, rebuilt sections, and declared it a monument of national pride. By the 1900s, the Colosseum was no longer a ruin to be feared or looted. It was heritage. Millions of people visit it every year now. Selfie sticks where swords once swung. Guides telling stories of bravery, cruelty, and fate. And somewhere beneath the concrete walkways and souvenir stalls, the original arena floor still waits, buried, quiet, patient. The ghosts don't mind the tourists. They've seen worse crowds. Then came the 19th and 20th centuries, the age of archaeology, photography, and tourism. The Italian state began restoring what was left. They propped up collapsing arches, rebuilt sections, and declared it a monument of national pride. By the 1900s, the Colosseum was no longer a ruin to be feared or looted. It was heritage. Millions of people visit it every year now. Selfie sticks where swords once swung. Guides telling stories of bravery, cruelty, and fate. And somewhere beneath the concrete walkways and souvenir stalls, the original arena floor still waits, buried, quiet, patient. The ghosts don't mind the tourists. They've seen worse crowds. The echo that never dies. What's haunting about the Colosseum isn't just what happened there. It's what it still feels like. If you stand in the center, when it's empty, really empty, just the wind echoing through, you can almost hear the roar. Not loud, but distant. Like memory itself, the ghosts of applause, the hiss of sand,
the faint metallic clang of a sword dropped centuries ago. The Colosseum breathes through time. It's not dead, it's just resting. A monument too stubborn to decay completely, too proud to be forgotten. The echo that never dies. What's haunting about the Colosseum isn't just what happened there, it's what it still feels like. If you stand in the center, when it's empty, really empty, just the wind echoing through, you can almost hear the roar. Not loud, but distant, like memory itself, the ghosts of applause, the hiss of sand, the faint metallic clang of a sword dropped centuries ago. The Colosseum breathes through time. It's not dead, it's just resting. A monument too stubborn to decay completely, too proud to be forgotten.
Rome's memory machine. Every empire builds something to prove it existed. The Egyptians had pyramids, the Greeks had philosophy. Rome had the Colosseum and everything it stood for: discipline, power, vanity, the belief that you could control life, death, and spectacle. But the Colosseum outlived the empire that built it, which in a way makes it the ultimate Roman victory. Even after the emperors, the armies, and the marble crumbled, the arena stayed, not as a trophy, but as a warning that everything grand and terrible eventually turns into dust and legend, and sometimes both at once. From sand to canvas, the gladiator reborn in art. When the Renaissance rediscovered Rome, it didn't just revive statues and columns, it resurrected the myths. Artists like Jean-Léon Gérôme painted gladiators not as brutes, but as tragic heroes. You've probably seen his most famous work, Pallas Verso, the one with the victorious gladiator standing tall as the crowd gives the thumbs down. That painting changed everything. Because before Gérôme, the gladiator was a forgotten corpse in the dirt. After him, he became a symbol. The painting captured that frozen moment, the crowd's cruelty, the victor's exhaustion, the loser's doom, and gave it beauty. It was barbaric, yes, but elegant, almost noble. The Victorians adored it. They saw the gladiator as a mirror of their own age, disciplined, strong, and moral beneath the spectacle. And just like that, the killer became a cultural icon.
The romantic gladiator, death as theater. By the 19th century, the gladiator was no longer just a historical figure. He was a metaphor. Poets wrote of him as a tragic soul, forced to perform for the pleasure of others, a man stripped of freedom, but not of dignity. In an age obsessed with honor and sacrifice, the gladiator fit perfectly. Pain became performance, death became art, and the public, whether in ancient amphitheaters or opera houses, was still hungry for the same thrill. Rome had vanished, but the appetite had not. The modern arenas, sports and spectacle. Let's move to today. The Colosseum may be rubble, but the spirit of the games is alive every time you walk into a stadium. Look closely at the design of a modern sports arena, the oval shape, the tiered seats, the roaring crowd focused on a single central spectacle. It's no accident. The Romans invented that architecture and that psychology. We may not be watching people die, at least not intentionally, but the energy is the same: competition, conflict, performance. The crowd doesn't just watch, it judges. The gladiator has become the athlete, the boxer, the UFC fighter. The sand has become the mat. The armor has become gloves and sponsorship logos. And while no emperor raises his thumb anymore, millions of fans do, with likes, retweets, and pay-per-view buys. Modern sport is sanitized, but it's still an echo, a ritualized version of the same ancient hunger, to watch another human being push to the limit, to flirt with danger from the safety of the stands. Then came the movies. In 2000, Ridley Scott's Gladiator reignited an obsession that had been simmering for centuries. Are you not entertained? A single line that captured the entire paradox of Rome and of us.
The film gave us Maximus, the perfect mythic figure, noble, enslaved, wronged, avenging. He fought not for money or spectacle, but for justice, and in doing so, made the arena seem almost moral. It was a fantasy, of course, but it worked, because deep down, audiences wanted to believe that behind the brutality, there had been meaning. That the gladiators weren't just victims, they were warriors with purpose. Since then, every generation has had its own gladiator, from Spartacus to video games like Assassin's Creed or Rise, Son of Rome. The image of the fighter, strong, tragic, defiant, keeps reappearing. It's not about history anymore. It's about identity. The digital arena, spectacle reborn. Now step into the 21st century, where the arena is everywhere. Social media has turned performance into survival. People fight for attention instead of life, but the mechanics are hauntingly similar. We build our own personas. We step into the spotlight. We wait for the crowd's reaction. The modern polis verso, thumbs up or thumbs down. And when someone falls, a scandal, a mistake, a public failure, the crowd still cheers. Cancel culture, outrage cycles, viral humiliation, all of it echoes Rome's ancient appetite for blood, just digital now. The arena didn't die, it just upgraded to Wi-Fi. The film gave us Maximus, the perfect mythic figure, noble, enslaved, wronged, avenging. He fought not for money or spectacle, but for justice, and in doing so, made the arena seem almost moral. It was a fantasy, of course, but it worked, because deep down, audiences wanted to believe that behind the brutality, there had been meaning. That the gladiators weren't just victims, they were warriors with purpose. Since then, every generation has had its own gladiator, from Spartacus to video games like Assassin's Creed or Rise, Son of Rome. The image of the fighter, strong, tragic, defiant, keeps reappearing. It's not about history anymore. It's about identity. The digital arena, spectacle reborn. Now step into the 21st century, where the arena is everywhere. Social media has turned performance into survival. People fight for attention instead of life, but the mechanics are hauntingly similar. We build our own personas. We step into the spotlight. We wait for the crowd's reaction. The modern polis verso, thumbs up or thumbs down. And when someone falls, a scandal, a mistake, a public failure, the crowd still cheers. Cancel culture, outrage cycles,
viral humiliation, all of it echoes Rome's ancient appetite for blood, just digital now. The arena didn't die, it just upgraded to Wi-Fi. The branding of the gladiator. In our time, the gladiator has become a brand, a symbol used to sell everything from cologne to cars. Words like warrior, beast, champion, they're all modern descendants of that same myth. Companies borrow it because it sells the idea of toughness, endurance, dominance. It's funny though. The real gladiators were slaves, not superstars. Their fame came with chains. Their victories earned them nothing but another day to fight. But in our retelling, we've made them heroes. And in doing so, maybe we've forgiven ourselves for still enjoying the spectacle. The branding of the gladiator. In our time, the gladiator has become a brand, a symbol used to sell everything from cologne to cars. Words like warrior, beast, champion, they're all modern descendants of that same myth. Companies borrow it because it sells the idea of toughness, endurance, dominance. It's funny though. The real gladiators were slaves, not superstars. Their fame came with chains. Their victories earned them nothing but another day to fight. But in our retelling, we've made them heroes. And in doing so, maybe we've forgiven ourselves for still enjoying the spectacle. The echo in our blood. Somewhere deep in our DNA, the roar of the Colosseum still hums. We may wear suits and screens now, but the instinct hasn't evolved much. We're still drawn to the drama of conflict, the poetry of pain, the theater of survival. It's not just entertainment, it's memory, ancient, shared, unbroken. Every generation builds its own version of the arena, its own gladiators, its own crowd. The rules change, the weapons change, but the story stays the same.